Guys, today I'm going to talk about the competitive overhaul and essentially draw some conclusions on what Bungie shared with us in the future of Destiny 2's PvP. Now, it's safe to say that the community reaction is pretty much mixed on this, and no lie, guys, I can't help but feel slightly skeptical. I'm excited, but at the same time, there is some fine wording put in these TWABs that does make us scratch our heads. Now, for those that don't know what the hell we're talking about, here is what we're getting next season. We're getting an actual ranked competitive mode, and I mean a true ladder system, or at least that's what Bungie is saying. We're also getting consolidated playlists, where essentially, instead of splitting the player base amongst various different playlists, these are going to be consolidated, meaning healthier populations per playlist, and the consequence of that should be better connections overall. We're also getting a new game mode and repriced armor from Destiny 1. I know a lot of people are like, oh, old armor sets. Again, this was a very popular armor set from Destiny 1. Today, though, I wanted us to actually take a look back at everything that was announced, specifically in regards to competitive, and try to nail down if these changes will actually improve PvP or make it worse. Starting with playlists. Now, there's a lot to talk about from just this, but let's recap what these changes are and then discuss in depth how they relate to each other. So starting with Quick Play 6v6, they're combining Clash and Control. They emphasize loose skill-based matchmaking. There's also going to be a weekly rotator 6v6 and free-for-all. This will rotate between Momentum Control, Mayhem, and Team Scorch, Rift, and Rumble. This will be purely connection-based matchmaking. Then we have the competitive division / freelance 3v3. This is a random selection of survival, Rift, and Showdown. It does use a timer skill-based matchmaking to match you against opponents of your skill. And this made a lot of us scratch our heads because we're going, hey, why is this even skill-based matchmaking? Shouldn't it be based on your rank? Next, we also have Crucible Maps, which will be 3v3 Rift. You'll have some reputation boosters here. This will also be purely connection-based matchmaking. And then, of course, private match remains unchanged. Trials of Osiris, they're actually replacing the Crucible Labs playlist each weekend with Trials of Osiris. It's still going to be ticket-based matchmaking, but Flawless Pool is looking to be reworked. Also, Iron Banner will still come twice a season. It'll also have a freelance mode for 6v6, but it will replace Quick Play, and it too will include loose skill-based matchmaking. So you will not be able to play Control or Clash during weeks that Iron Banner is in the game. Now let's talk about playlist consolidation real quick. Early in the trial, Bungie actually outlined their philosophy for the Crucible, and fair games was a note present on both casual and ranked playlists. Fair meaning skill-based matchmaking. Bungie is still holding on to skill-based matchmaking, guys, and they're not going to give it up. And over the past season, they've been watering down skill-based matchmaking to make it more digestible for higher skill players and essentially increasing the parameters there, which should enable people to still have decent connections even at the higher end. Now, the next step then is to consolidate the number of playlists to increase the number of possible good connections a single player can have within their skill bracket, and to widen that skill bracket when no good connections can be found. They're actually calling this dynamic skill-based matchmaking, but it's basically designed to make skill-based matchmaking as connection-based matchmaking as possible, or at least get it close to that. So if you're a high skill player and you want easier matches, congrats. Playing at 3 a.m. should solve your problems, or so in theory. Now, this isn't the first time Bungie has worked with consolidated playlists. Crucible has had reworks in the past. Consolidation of the playlist has been used in PvE as well. And understand player consolidation, among other reasons, served as a justification for sunsetting. And understand the order of operations here, guys, is I think before Bungie throws skill-based matchmaking out, they're going to try consolidation of these playlists. And then after a season of this, they're going to gauge player sentiment inside of PvP. And then if folks still don't like the direction PvP is going in, they may remove skill-based matchmaking. And DMG essentially all but confirmed on Twitter right now that the goal is to give new players space to breathe, which is exactly why skill-based matchmaking launched to begin with. This also explains why the Quick Play playlist has skill-based matchmaking while Labs and Rotators are still connection-based matchmaking. Now, if the revamped competitive playlist pulls enough of the hardcore players away from Quick Play, we may actually see a removal of skill-based matchmaking entirely. It's a faint possibility, but it does exist. I think what's going to happen, there's three options. A, Bungie removes skill-based matchmaking after this season, or the next season, I mean, if player sentiment doesn't go up. B, Bungie's actually going to consolidate playlists even more. Now, I know this is going to sound like a leap, but Bungie may eventually merge all platforms together under one house. So they're consolidating Crucible playlists as it is, and then take it a step further and allow console players and PC players, whether you're on Epic Games, PlayStation or Xbox or PC, all of us will be playing together. This would substantially increase player counts in all of these core playlists, especially Crucible, which should mean better connections overall. Granted, I think most of my console players don't want to play with PC players. Now, option C is is actually Bungie saying, hey, this is how it is. This is skill-based matchmaking. Get over it, which is very much a possibility as well. Now let's talk about fire team-based matchmaking. Bungie actually brought this up. Basically, starting next season, you'll be matched against players with fire teams of similar size. So if you're in a team of 6, you'll also be matching another team of 6. If you're in a team of 3, you match another 3s, solo versus solos, etc. Now the question comes up, why does Bungie even want to do this when we already have freelance playlists available for things like Iron Banner? I actually think this is Bungie's way of eventually getting rid of freelance. Again, freelance works against the consolidation of playlists. You're splitting the player base even more. This, however, if it actually works, will allow Bungie to consolidate playlists yet again, putting everybody in the same pool. And even though you won't be playing an entire team of solos, maybe it might be another solo and a team of 2. And on your team, you might be the solo and you have a team of 2 with you as well. Not as good as solos versus solos, but still a hell of a lot better than facing a team of 3 and say competitive or trials. Again, this is really going to come down to how well Bungie actually does here with this fire team-based matchmaking. Penalties was also brought up, and essentially Bungie stated that this was actually an emergency measure due to how many people were quitting this past season. They're actually going to be lowering the suspension time, adding a timer, because I think overall the penalty really hurt player replayability. Obviously, if you get booted accidentally to then suddenly be met with a player penalty, and then you're not allowed to play Crucible anymore, or at least the playlist you want to play, that sucks. And there's a good chance you probably just shut Destiny 2 down. Also, I don't agree that quinter penalties should ever exist on a casual playlist like Control, or any 6v6 playlist for that matter. I understand it for things like comp, or even things like trials. Now, new rewards was also brought up, and all of these are pretty good. A new seal, vendor quality of life updates, essentially what we've seen with our other rituals, reprised Destiny 1 banner armor, new trial weapons is also coming. All of these are very good for PvP. And Iron Banner actually looks as though it may be getting some PvE elements, as in, is this Gambit 3.0? There's also some hope of the Exile Trials set returning based on DMG's response to a post on Twitter. This was a very, very good set, one of the most popular. Now, Crucible Maps. This is where we are all scratching our head on, and I do not understand what the deal is with the lack of Crucible Maps. And Sheik's tweet actually really puts this in perspective. If you want to make the argument that 4 maps added into the game, new and reprised over the course of a year is fine, let's use that as the starting point. If the biggest complaint in the PvP community for the past 3 years has been no new maps, and now this year you have only 3 releasing, down from the previous year's 4, that is not a good look, Bungie. Production should be increasing, not decreasing. This should actually be your PvP priority number 1. On top of that, we don't even know when these 3 maps are releasing. It could be Lightfall, it could be after, which means it's quite possible Season 19 does not have a reprised Crucible map. Granted, they may have more maps planned for the year, but based on what we're presented, 3 looks to be the number that we're getting. Now, they do call out to hire someone specifically for designing maps. Again, though, why? We have so many Destiny 1 maps that you can just bring back in the game. Hell, we got so many Destiny 2 maps that you could just bring back to us. I'm not saying hiring a map designer isn't something important, and obviously this needs to be a position filled continuously, but the fact that this is just an afterthought at this point in Destiny's life is shameful. Now, the competitive division. This is the other big topic. Before we look into competitive changes, though, I do want to dive into the history of the competitive game mode. Some of you remember back in Season 3 when things really started to kick off with the likes of Redrick's Claymore. So starting with May 8th, 2018, competitive ranking was added to Destiny 2 during the Warmind DLC update 1.2. Now, this actually came at the same time as custom games. There was multiple game modes like Countdown and Survival, and it had a ranking system that included streak bonuses. And your skill and rank were actually 2 separate metrics. Skill ranks were reset in competitive on the launch of this new system. So rank and skill may have correlated the more you played, but ultimately skill-based matchmaking was the driving factor of who you played, not based off your rank. Now, before its removal in Forsaken, it was also possible to have a losing streak, leading to more points removed from your rank. Now, this was also a time when we didn't have radar, which honestly, I mean, we trashed on it when it was first introduced, but let's be real, if there was ever a time for Bungie to try something new, that was the time to do it. We just found that no radar just didn't work with Destiny's sound designs. Sound cues here are just not that good. Now, Forsaken brought radar back to the comp playlist. Now, when the Crucible ranks was first added to the game in Season 3, there was Trials, but it wasn't Trials of Osiris. It was actually still Trials of the 9 back then, and this is also when Trials was 4v4. A lot of people were actually burnt out on Trials and disliked it. So competitive actually became the pinnacle of in-game PvP, and soon it had pinnacle rewards to match. You had powerful weapons like Luna's Hound, Not Forgotten. Redrick's Claymore was the first one on that list. Recluse, though, Mountaintop. These were the meta weapons. They had defining perks and stats, and if they hadn't been sunsets, they would probably still be at the top of the usage charts to this day. Now, these weapons, for the most part, were actually introduced as seasonal offerings. and hitting a certain rank that season, which was Fabled, would reward you a pinnacle weapon. Season 3 was Regic's Claymore, and reaching legend rank would actually reward you an ornament for that weapon. Forsaken swapped out Regic's Claymore for Regic's Broadsword and added Luna's Howl. Now, after completing the Luna's Howl quest, you could begin the quest Not Forgotten, which will require you to hit max rank in competitive. It was sweaty, fellas. I'm talking balls in your face. But boy, was it worth it, because you would get Not Forgotten. And this was back in the day when Not Forgotten was a 180, and both Not Forgotten and Luna's Howl would actually bug out, and you could 2-tap with it. It was nasty. Now, subsequent seasons after would add new seasonal pinnacle weapons to chase that would always give players something to chase in comp. And this is really what kept the comp playlist alive, season after season. Now, the changes. Bungie is adding a rank system to the competitive Crucible, where you can progress through the ranks, and the ranks include Copper, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Platinum, Adept, and Ascendant. And each of these divisions will have subdivisions. So, for example, Gold 1, 2, and 3. Now, there will be placements each season. You'll need to play every week if you're above Gold to keep your rank from deflating. And earlier, Destiny 2 comp had a similar system, which required 3 matches a week. You'll be rewarded for participating in comp with higher Crucible XP gains, meaning overall more loot and better loot with more perks. We're also going to have Crucible weapon focusing, and the big one is Clout. Now, here's the rub. The 2 big points of controversy here with the introduction of competitive ranks are 1, skill-based matchmaking integration into the playlist, and the reward structure as presented by Bungie. Now, let me just cover comp skill-based matchmaking, because this is a head-scratcher. Skill-based matchmaking is being implemented into the ranked playlist. Granted, though, we don't know to what extent. I'm assuming it's going to be tighter than that of our 6v6 playlist. The wording here is confusing, because in some places, the TWAB actually says this is a true ladder-based system, and in others, it says it uses new skill-based matchmaking settings timed to match you closely against opponents of your skill. Now, this seems counterintuitive. The whole point of ranked is to match people within your division, and if the skill level doesn't match people within your division, that decides who goes up and who goes down. If you're being matched with players at your skill level constantly, that may completely skew where you place. And if your performance is good, but you're losing more because you're in harder games, it may actually inhibit your ability to climb. Granted, this is something we're gonna have to see the implementation of, because if it does make it more difficult for players to reach the rank that reflects their skill level, it shouldn't be an issue. It is possible that this is also implemented for the sake of lobby balancing. Now, I think the point that needs to be clear here is that competitive players don't need protection by an algorithm. Ranked should be a test of skill. You're either higher or you're lower. And this is the case for all games that have a true rank system. It's a get good system, fellas. The more knobs you're trying to turn outside of improving match connections, the more the players are fighting the game and not each other. When playing ranked, newer players would naturally be protected by division matchups, and hardcore players would be playing others at their skill level naturally. Again, more clarification on this topic by Bungie would be much appreciated, and hopefully in a TWAB leading up to the next season. So again, when we read true ladder-based system, what we're hoping for is that it actually is a true ladder-based system. Will you hit a ceiling or a wall indicating what your skill level is and that you can't go any further? Naturally, yeah. And that's the case with every game that has a competitive game mode. If you hit platinum and suddenly realize, oh shoot, I can't go any further than platinum because these other platinum and diamond players keep pooping on me, then unfortunately, that's the way it is. Now moving on to rewards. Outside of XP gain increases, it doesn't really look like there's going to be any reward for ranking up in comp. Rose is just a participation reward. And although I'm really happy to be getting Rose back, it's not a rank reward. The end of the TWAB does mention cosmetic rewards, but for a season post Lightfall. This is not coming next season and not coming in Lightfall. This is very concerning. The whole reason why competitive was so good in the past was because it had good rewards. Don't get me wrong. Some people are like, yo, I'm legend. Look at me. But that was not the motivator. The motivator was the weapons. Now, it doesn't have to be weapons. It can be cosmetics. We don't need to have pinnacles back in the game. We saw what that did before. But for those higher ranks, you gotta have something. Emblems, cosmetics, some way to flex. And these are things that PvP players really do care about. I would say that a lot of problems in Destiny come from players feeling unrewarded for their time. Now, I did see this argument brought up yesterday in our TWAB video. People were saying, yo, you don't actually get rewards for ranking up in other competitive games. You're right, but let's remember, at the end of the day, Destiny is a looter shooter. That's why we play this game. You're giving us those dopamine hits every time we get something to drop for us. So if you're gonna add competitive to a looter shooter, there needs to be a loot part, not just a participation reward. Now, DMG has actually been very responsive to this feedback, so Bungie knows this is what we want, but it's important for Bungie to understand how important this actually is. The worst thing they could give starved PvP players is false hope in a rewarding competitive experience, and if we have to wait another 6 months after the release of competitive to be rewarded for playing, Jesus, terrible. And again, it doesn't have to be much here. Some cool shaders, some emblems, make our competitive rank visible somewhere. You can even have a leaderboard showing off some of the top players at the tower, put it over there next to Shaxx. Hell, he's got a damn board behind him. Make that thing show something. Now, there was actually a really cool video put out a few months ago by Drew Bird, and essentially he proposed adding evolving armor into Destiny 2 competitive, similar to what we have for Trials and Guardian games, but more fleshed out. And essentially, the higher your rank goes, the cooler your armor looks, so you can really sport your skill in that Destiny drip. And if you remember our armor sets for Age of Triumph back inside of Destiny 1, I kind of imagine a system like that, but for competitive. Again, if you're interested in that video, guys, a link to that will be in the description below. So fellas, that is our thoughts on the competitive mode and everything that was talked about in the most recent TWAB. I kind of just wanted to give some clarifications. We are kind of in the dark on some things, and this is going to be one of those situations that a week or two after we play competitive for the first time, we'll be able to collect our thoughts and then put out a review on things. I hope this revives Destiny's PvP. And before people say PvP is not necessary for this game, this is a PvE game, that's the beauty of Destiny, is PvE and PvP. I love going in between both of those. I love a weapon inside of a raid that you spend multiple encounters grinding for to get that god roll is suddenly a monster inside of PvP. And then suddenly that PvP weapon you went into trials for is a monster inside of PvE. That's the beauty of the game. It makes you cross over. But the PvP scene for Destiny has been unhealthy for a long time, and I really do hope this improves it. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.